And we're live. Live we are. Thank you again, Main Joe, for setting up our studio. Appreciate you as always.
Man, we had a little time off, and it's good to be back.
Very
and
good.
we're coming back with a punch.
Yeah. This is a big one. When was our last jam or our last podcast? That was like 3 weeks ago?
Seems that way,
It
yeah.
feels like
yeah.
3 months.
I had to go to a wedding back in Minnesota, and
That's
I
right.
had to take some time off. And
Yeah. Well, let me tell you a little story about what happened today.
okay.
So I was doing housework, and I remembered a book that I have read cover to cover many times, and searched high and low for it, searched the entire house. I found my old college transcripts, but I couldn't find this book. And I remembered suddenly that I had lent it to my mom. She took it down to her condo down in Mesquite, Nevada, and that's where it is. So this book is one of my favorite things. It's a bunch of editorial cartoons. It's probably 20 years old. I'm not sure. I've been reading it for years. And, Man Joe, would you help me in welcoming the author of this book and many others? Mr. Pat Begley has joined us.
Well, thank you.
I might be your newest fan. I mean, I have lived in the Valley for like 26 years, read the paper, of course. I've probably seen your editorial cartoons, but until we had Christine Stenquist on, and her and Mojo were talking about you, that's when I went home and looked you up and was blown away by how amazing you are, and just made me laugh. I spent minutes, hours looking at you. Yeah, because it's been really fun getting to know you through your cartoons, and now here you are face to face, and I got to admit I'm a little nervous to meet you, and welcome to our small, humble, little average Joe podcast.
Yeah,
Appreciate you being on.
Well, thank you. So about 10 years ago, I won, it's called the Herblock Prize, right? And this is a prize back in Washington, D.C., and it's named after Herblock, who was the cartoonist for the Washington Post for decades. He did that great stuff about Nixon. But they called up to let me know that I won, and the guy said, you won this great award, and we'll fly you out, and it's going to be in the Library of Congress. And I thought, this is great. And he said, what are you doing in Salt Lake? And he couldn't quite figure out why this fairly liberal cartoonist is out in the reddest state in the nation.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, well,
That's a good question.
that checks one of my questions off my list.
From what I understood from Wikipedia, you grew up in Oceanside, California.
That's right.
Which is a much more liberal part of the country, I would imagine. Or maybe not so much.
It's near Orange County, and it was the Marine base is right next door.
Okay.
And so it was fairly conservative. My father was conservative. I remember when he took me to a Goldwater, the train stop. They used to do that. The candidates used to go on trains, and they'd stop and get out in the back and do the little rally. And I remember going as a little kid to watch Goldwater.
Wow.
Oh, wow.
And I thought, this guy, he shines.
Interesting.
But that was back in the day when you could be liberal and be Republican. I mean,
Yeah.
because my father wasn't just pigeonholed. He admired, there was Percy, there was Hatfield, there was Governor Rockefeller. These were all Republicans, but they were also liberal. And another one who was kind of fairly liberal was George Romney, Mitt Romney's father.
Yeah.
Interesting.
He ran for president, too, didn't he?
Yeah, he did.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah. Well, if we're going to jump into politics really quick, I heard Noam Chomsky say something that stuck with me, was that Democrats are today's Republicans, and Republicans have gone so far off to the right that you can't even measure them anymore.
Oh, that's absolutely true.
Yeah, I agree.
I mean, when I get asked about my politics, I say that I'm an Eisenhower Republican. I believe in infrastructure, things like the state highway system. I think we should be doing more of that kind of stuff.
Makes sense.
Education, the GI Bill. And he believed in supporting the Social Security, not Medicare back then, but he was actually fairly...
Having a safety net of some sort.
Having a safety net, yeah.
Because, he probably lived through the Depression and saw the devastation.
Oh, yeah.
With the poverty and all that.
Well, he saw more devastation than most people.
Well, that's
true.
Yeah, so grew up in Oceanside, and then what did bring you to Utah? Well, first, may I ask, were you raised in an LDS household, or did you come to it later in life?
So I was born in Salt Lake City.
Oh,
and when I was 3 years old, my parents moved to Oceanside. And people don't remember this about Utah, but Utah didn't really get out of the Great Depression until about the 1970s.
Wow.
Wow. Didn't know.
I did not know that.
Okay, here's something else that people don't realize, is Utah had the highest unemployment rate during the Great Depression than any other state. It was 30%. And we tell ourselves the story that the church welfare system somehow got us through. But we took more federal assistance than any other state per capita.
Interesting.
Yeah. But the effects of the Great Depression lasted here for a long time. And it wasn't until the 1970s. And Utah had invested in education. If you were a legislator, your main focus was on getting money to the schools. And it paid off. And we're reaping the benefits of that right now.
Yeah, we've got a
Love
little
Utah even more now.
Yeah.
That's cool. So did you get a scholarship to BYU or something? Or
Well, no, my parents said you can go anywhere you want to school, but we're only going to pay for BYU. So that kind of narrowed the possibilities.
all right. So you got your degree. I looked it up, but I forget. Was it journalism? or-
Political science and history.
Okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Yeah.
That's what makes him such a potent editorial cartoonist, because he knows his
Yeah.
history as well.
But, I didn't go into those fields because I wanted to be a cartoonist.
I understand that as well.
I was
yeah.
thinking maybe, I'll be a public administrator or maybe go to law school or something like that. And it was just by accident that I fell into what I do.
And the story goes, he's sitting in finance class, doodling, and he comes up with this cartoon. He sends it into the school newspaper at BYU, and they publish it.
Yeah.
And then it ends up getting published elsewhere as well.
Yeah. The very first political cartoon I ever did got published in Time magazine.
Out of the gate!
So I was hooked, right? I mean,
How could you not
after
be?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You remind me of a line from the movie Broadcast News. Do you remember that? William Hurt.
Oh, yeah.
And William Hurt was this doofus who became the anchor and just kept making more money and promotions, and he was freaked out. He came from sports. So he asked the Albert Brooks character, what do you do when your real life exceeds your dreams? This kind of sounds like that. That's how you started,
that?
right?
No, absolutely. And when I told my mother that I wanted to be a cartoonist, she said the only kind of artist is a starving artist. And so she was not very supportive.
Right. They were-
But I went on to do cartoons for the Daily Universe, and then I went to the Salt Lake Tribune because they were the last fairly big newspaper in the country that didn't have its very own cartoonist.
Oh.
And I thought, I'm a shoo-in because I know the culture, I know the politics here.
So you pitched them?
Uh-huh.
Wow. Cool.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
And they said, nope, we're fine.
Wow.
We haven't had a cartoonist for 100 years, and we'll be fine for the next 100.
Oh, wow.
But the guy who told me, thanks but no thanks, he was an assistant managing editor. And the managing editor, I didn't know at the time, was feuding with this guy. So when the managing editor, the presiding editor, found out that I'd been in, and he hadn't been told, that kind of upset him. And so he hired me in kind of a fit of pique.
In spite.
just to show who was boss.
Nice.
Yeah.
Take what you can get,
Exactly,
Yeah, get
right.
that foot in the door.
Uh-huh.
Wow.
Well, that's what I do with the Two Joes podcast. Is I invite the guests. I let Main Joe know who's boss here.
There you go. I can see that.
I'm just a roadie.
So was your artistic talent? Obvious at a very young age, like 2, 3, 4 years old, or?
Well, yeah. We were talking earlier about how my mother wanted me to learn an instrument, which is, a fine thing, but it was kind of wasted on me. 3 years of piano lessons, and it just didn't really take. But the thing that I always loved to do was to draw. And I remember in school, even in kindergarten, I would draw something. And I remember my kindergarten teacher walking behind me, and she stopped. And she goes, "What's that?" And I said, "That's a tree, and that's a ghost, and that's an airplane." She goes,
As in a complimentary way, or?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
It was actually something that you could recognize. And I was, 4 or 5 years old?
Oh, love it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, great.
Wow.
And so you never really did you do any formal training, any formal schooling for art?
No, I did take art classes, through high school, junior high. Even when I went to BYU, I took the art classes for non-majors because I liked it. I had some talent in that direction. But again, I was brought up very practical,
Right.
and so the kind of artist is a starving artist.
Right.
And so I never really had any ambitions to make this my profession. And things just worked out that, here I am.
So after that first editorial cartoon went viral, in those days, getting published in Time magazine,
yeah,
essentially viral.
Yeah.
Did you start working for the BYU newspaper and get more of your? Did you become a regular at that point? Did they say, "Whoa, we've got something here"?
Well,
Sign 'em up?
so that first cartoon that I did, I took in the sketch, and I thought their cartoonist would do a finished copy of it.
Right.
And their cartoonist at the time was Steve Benson, who was the grandson of Ezra Taft Benson, the prophet of the church.
Yeah.
And he was kind of the crown prince of the whole Benson clan.
Wow.
I mean, the Bensons had big ambitions for him.
The
But
heir apparent, huh?
yeah, but he wanted to be a cartoonist instead. And so that led him into a whole different path. But he did win the Pulitzer Prize, and he won it by doing cartoons about Evan Meacham. And I don't know if you remember Evan Meacham. He was the governor of...
Rings a bell, but vaguely.
Vaguely, yeah.
He was the governor of Arizona, and he was a right-wing nut job. And Steve Benson, well, he's also Mormon. And Steve Benson, being a Mormon cartoonist, he just went after Meacham.
Wow.
And Meacham actually called him up one evening late at night and said, if you don't stop this, your eternal salvation is at risk.
Go a nuclear option.
I hope he drew a cartoon about that.
Yeah, I mean, that's just throwing gasoline on a fire for a cartoonist. Come at me.
Love it.
Wow.
So anyway, I thought Steve was going to do the cartoon.
Right.
But they had me run home and do a finished copy and then come back. And then I started to do cartoons and show it to them, and they took me on. And so Steve and I were both doing cartoons for the Daily Universe. And then he left for the summer, and I had the whole thing to myself. And when he got back, they said, "Oh, we don't want to choose between the two of you, so we're going to have both of you." And that's how I got started.
Great. Wow.
And I don't mean to date anybody here, but was it 1977 when you started?
Okay, so this is, in fact, in 4 days, it's my 40th anniversary of the Tribune.
Oh, wow.
Wow. Congratulations.
Yeah, so this was a year before that. So 78
78.
is when I started doing this, yeah.
Wow, man.
Wow. So has anybody come for you like that?
Yeah,
say,
what's
hey,
your big? I'm
back
sure they
off,
have. What's your biggest battle that you've had? Or
Well, he wrote several books on Bush, so I'm wondering if you got a call there.
Oh, well, I did a cartoon about Gordon B. Hinckley, who was, again, the president of the church.
Yeah.
And when I did it, I thought, this is kind of dicey because, I'm not sure that anybody had done a caricature of a living prophet, but this was new territory. And so I was thinking, well, the thing is, he's new, and he's different in that he is making himself available to the media. I mean, he was going on Larry King. He got to be good friends with Wallace on 60 Minutes. They became good buddies.
Wow.
So he was very different from other previous presidents of the church, in that he was very media savvy and media friendly. And so he's putting himself out there, and I thought, well, he's fair game.
I think that's a good call, yeah.
So I went ahead and I did the cartoon, and it's Larry King interviewing Hinckley, and he's saying, how does it go? When we return, more of Mormons, ordinary people just trying to become gods. So I did this cartoon, and it goes out, and I hear back from lots of people who are offended on his behalf because this is sacrilegious.
Yeah.
He's God's spokesman on earth, and doing a cartoon, doing caricature of him is bad news. He shouldn't do that. But I heard later, of course he'd seen the cartoon. People had shown it to him, and they said, he kind of liked it. And it's true. He looks kind of cute in the cartoon.
cute?
Cute.
Unassuming, not threatening at all.
Yeah.
Well, Pat, I love your work so much. Please stay away from the Prophet Muhammad. Don't.
Well, that's the thing is I did a prophet cartoon before those Danish guys did.
Yeah.
Right.
Wow.
But I was looking at the same thing. Is this going to piss people off? And and the thing is they did it.
Yeah.
And you can see how religious people can go a little kind of crazy over this stuff.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. We see it all over the world every day, really.
Oh yeah.
If I could jump to I think my favorite cartoon that you ever did was in the weeks leading up to the invasion of Iraq with George W. Bush, and you drew a cartoon that blended George W. Bush and Curious George, the monkey, and you captioned it "Curious George Goes to War," and it shows this monkey president fingering a Pandora's box, getting ready to open it. And he's got his war helmet on and everything, and that was just so brilliant.
So poignant, yeah.
So, I mean,
It's right on the money.
Well, thank you. Yeah, it was Clueless George Goes to War.
Clueless George, was it? Yeah, it was. Clueless George Goes to
Along
War.
with a lot of clueless Congress members.
Oh, yeah.
Members
Oh, yeah.
of Congress.
Oh,
I
yeah.
mean, he had help going. Yeah, it's ridiculous. But yeah, that's what's so great about your cartoons is how it points out the obvious in a way. It's like this one cartoon I looked at today. On the left side, you have all these people, Republicans, and they've got their signs up what they're for. They're for no abortion and tax cuts for the rich and all this other stuff. And on the other side, it's Medicare for all and all these
Education,
and all these
infrastructure.
Democratic planks of their platform. And it's just I forget what the punchline was now. But anyway,
Memorable, though.
but it's just pointing out the obvious, and it makes me scratch my head, and I think that's what your cartoons are kind of meant to do, and make you think and make you scratch your head and say,
And kind of laugh too at the same time.
Absolutely, yeah.
My favorite recurring character is often in the corner of the panel, you'll see a seagull with its beak wide open, just laughing its ass off.
Oh, yeah.
At the absurdity of what it sees going
yeah.
on. Do you have a nickname for that seagull?
No, it's just the seagull.
Just the seagull?
Yeah.
Right on.
But I've got a book coming out in about a week.
I saw
wow.
the post on Facebook.
Yeah.
The first cut. I saw you were holding a big panel.
Yeah, and the seagull is, on the cover of the book.
All right. I'm buying it. Absolutely. Yeah. How many books have you published?
Oh, I don't know. I mean, the books that only I have done, maybe a dozen.
Okay.
But books where my cartoons have been published, I have no idea.
Countless. I'm sure.
My son went to, he was taking some college class, and it was economics. And he opens up the textbook, and there's one of my cartoons.
wow.
Wow.
So the cartoons get picked up, and who knows where they are.
So do you get royalties for all these? Like,
That was going to be
yeah.
my question. Okay, I was
Yeah.
going to say, and I also ran into this website. I think it was Kaggle or something like
Oh, yeah.
that.
Kaggle.
Kaggle
And they
is
have. It
great.
seemed like just about every cartoon you ever made on
Yeah.
there.
KagleCartoons.com, and I've been with them since probably 2003 or 2004.
So this is who you've kind of licensed it to, and so they're the ones that put your cartoons in the books. Is that how it
So
works?
Kaggle.com is international. It goes out to over, I want to say about 1,000 publications.
Yeah.
So publications can subscribe to Kaggle and print anything that's on his site.
Okay. Yeah.
And so before that, my stuff was only in Salt Lake City. After Kaggle took me on, then my stuff gets out all over the place. And I'll only know it because somebody will say, I saw you in the Irish Times, or I saw you in Times of London, or I saw you in Le Monde.
Le Monde.
Yeah, but it goes everywhere now.
Interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I saw where it's in over like 400 different publications now your stuff goes out to, or something like that,
Well, yeah, this is the Kaggle thing.
all over the world.
Yeah, and he keeps giving me different numbers about how many people subscribe. But it's a lot.
That's great.
Yeah.
Wow.
So I've always wondered about the process of, if I made cartooning. Getting the idea and getting it down. Maybe the most famous cartoonist of all time would have been Charles Schultz.
Oh, yeah.
with the Peanuts, and so I just wonder what's your average workday like. I don't imagine that you just cartoon from 8 to 5. You do it whenever the inspiration hits you, and how many hours per week or day or month?
Well, I mean, you're creative too. I mean, you play music and you get ideas, and it doesn't necessarily. It's not on a schedule, right?
Yeah.
And so you kind of follow the idea, and every single day I go into work, it's a tightrope act because I have no idea what I'll be doing, but there's something out there, and I have to search and find it. Sometimes I'll wake up and I'll have the idea, and I will scribble it down, and other times I'm pushing the deadline. It's 2:30. And I have to have it in by 5, and I have got nothing.
Oh boy.
Yeah, but every day is different. Every day is, but you're always looking for that idea, that nails the subject.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
So you have daily deadlines then? Or
Oh,
is
yeah.
it, every day then. Wow.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Gotcha.
So I imagine you're reading more than just the Trib to get your ideas. I mean,
Yeah,
to
so-
get your information from. Do you have favorite publications?
well, there's the obvious ones: is New York Times, Washington Post, Newsweek, kind of. I also read the local stuff. I mean, I'll kind of browse through the Deseret News occasionally, just to see what they're saying. But then I'll also look at the right-wing websites just to know what they're talking about.
Breitbart or the hardcore? Right?
Oh, no, well, all of it.
Yeah,
You know, Talking Points Memo, Breitbart. But I need to be aware of, you know, what's being said and how they're saying it.
Yeah.
And, you know, back in the day, I grew up with 3 networks, and
Me too.
they were all pretty much the same. And now we have all of these, it's fractured, and you can get the nuttiest stuff out there, right? And people listen to it. People buy it.
Yeah.
One of the things I don't do is I don't watch TV news. You know, I don't watch CNN. I don't watch MSNBC. You know, occasionally somebody will send me, well, you should watch this John Oliver piece.
Yeah,
And I'll do that because he's really good.
He is good. He is.
It's very funny.
Yeah, but I get almost all my news from paper, from words.
Newspaper.
Yeah, I don't do the TV news because it's just too. You can't really tell the full story in 2-3 minutes.
Too short. Yeah.
Too short.
Do you listen to podcasts ever?
Oh yeah.
Get lines on ideas from that, I imagine.
Oh yeah. I mean, you've heard of Gaslit Nation?
No.
Sarah Kendzior?
No.
Oh,
Wow.
she's really good.
I have
to
now.
check out.
Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, she studied repressive authoritarian regimes in. It's after the breakup of the Soviet Union, but like Uzbekistan and some of these places went very authoritarian really quick, and so that was her field of study. And she saw what was happening with the Republican Party and Trump.
Oh.
She goes, "Oh, I've seen this before."
Oh no! Don't tell me that.
Yeah.
I was worried enough. Dang.
I mean, the nepotism, bring your family in, and I've had this experience too, where I was in France last year at this cartoon conference, and these people who are from outside the United States, they're from third world countries, you know, the Middle East, and again Uzbekistan, places like that, and they say, we understand how a family comes into power, and they corrupt the whole system. And they loot the treasury. We understand that. We never thought it would happen to you.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Pretty ominous.
wow.
I gotta say.
And that is what just happened. you
Yeah.
know, and man.
On some of my favorite cartoons you do too are the whole impeachment cartoons, like the one where you've got all these shells in the foreground and they have on there, all the different things Trump has done, and I forget. I think it's a donkey is loading the shell into the cannon, and
No, we need more ammunition. Yes, plenty of ammunition.
one of our first podcasts, we talked to Generation Z about it. And this was months ago. Do you think we should impeach or not, and all this? And it's like, what took them so long? It's crazy. And then you kind of point out Nancy Pelosi has a lot to do with it. You got the buses lined up, and there's Pelosi standing in front of them saying, "No, it's too early," or I don't know what. I mean, and the other one that kind of cracked me up is when you said you had Nixon and Trump, and what's the difference?
Oh,
and,
yeah.
And Nixon sitting there on a phone call with the tape recorder going and saying, "Okay, how do we get the dirt on the political opponent," and Trump sitting up there on the podium right out in the open saying, "Hey Russia, why don't you help me out there, Russia?" But because he does it out in the open, it appears like it's not a crime. I don't get it. It's just it's amazing to me.
Well, Nixon used the White House plumbers, right? And Donald Trump has outsourced it to foreign sources, right?
Yeah.
So now he's got Putin who's doing his dirty work for him. So
Yeah.
And he loves WikiLeaks until it's not necessarily on his side anymore, or starts pointing out the stuff he's doing, and then
How many times did he say, "I love WikiLeaks" on the
Enemy
campaign
number
trail?
one. Yeah.
And now it's all WikiLeaks isn't my thing. Not really my deal.
he's amazing.
Back to Nixon for a moment, if you would. You mentioned the name Herb Block recently.
Yeah.
And I think I remember a very famous cartoon, and I want to know if it was his. You would certainly know. It was right during all the turmoil of Watergate, and the tapes were coming out, or tapes were supposed to come out. I forget. Anyway, the cartoon just showed 2 reels of the tape, and then Nixon holding on to the tape on either side, and then on the tape it says, "I am not," and then over here, a crook. But the "not" was in Nixon's mouth. It was a piece of tape that says, "I am a crook," and Nixon sitting there holding these together with "not" in his mouth right here. And it was a brilliant. It sounds like a Herb Block.
Oh yeah. And this is back in the day when cartoonists had a lot of influence, and people like Pat Oliphant and Herb Block actually helped bring down Trump, or not Trump. There we
Nixon.
go.
Yeah.
Nixon.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You don't think they have influence anymore? I mean,
Well, when I started, there were maybe 200, 250 papers that had their own cartoonist.
Mm-hmm.
And now we're down to 20.
Wow.
So newspapers have taken a big hit.
Well,
Right?
that's true. I didn't notice that.
Yeah, and people write to me and say, "Well, it's because you're liberal and you're driving readers away and stuff like that." That's not it at all. I mean,
Liberals read.
Yeah.
yeah, but the problem with newspapers, smaller newspapers, well, we're not small, but papers like the Salt Lake Tribune is. We used to print these big editions that had 3 and 4 sections of nothing but ads, personal ads, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's all gone.
Wow. Well, that was.
I remember those. Yeah,
They
are
said that
gone,
was
yeah.
I
didn't even put that
huge
together.
revenue source for them.
Oh,
I think
it
I remember
was.
reading about that.
I mean, I actually looked at the revenue stream for the Tribune over the last 30 years, and it was like printing money. You get the personal ads in there, and
If you want to
they're
find a
not- they're
job,
not
that's
cheap.
where you go. I mean,
Exactly. You know, and now it's all KSL.com and
Yeah,
the other sites,
Craigslist.
Craigslist,
Yeah.
and it's free, and it's better than we ever did. You know, in our personal ads.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Well, it's easier to find and search, things like
Yeah.
that.
So that's what's killed newspapers. We've
Interesting.
lost that source of revenue.
yeah.
At the risk of offending your modesty, a guest we had recently, Christine Stenquist. I don't know if you.
Oh yeah, I know Christine.
Yeah.
Sure.
And she went as far as to say that you are essentially keeping the Salt Lake Tribune afloat right now. Is that overstating a bit? And again, I don't mean to
Well,
offend your
I
modesty.
hope my owner hears that. That would be a nice thing for him to know. But Christine Stenquist is one of the leaders of the fight for legalizing medical marijuana
Yes.
in the state. Yeah.
Yeah. Mhm. She said you drew a cartoon of her.
Yeah, I
once.
forgot to look
yeah.
it up. I wanted to see
I
how you
couldn't
drew
find
her.
it. I tried to.
Did you try and
I
find it?
couldn't find it.
I forgot to
Yeah.
look for it, but
You remember it?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Well, we'll look it up. We won't.
Yeah,
ask you
I
to
saw it.
describe it.
But one of the things I love about your cartoons too, like today, I was looking at this cartoon. You have this car drive up, and these people get out, and it has prop 3 on the front, and they give their keys to the valet, and then when they come back to pick up their car, now prop 3 is SM96 or whatever, and it's because in this, Christine enlightened me to this fact, is that in this state, even though it passes on a vote, on a ballot and all that, the legislators can just rewrite it
Yeah.
and make
Yeah.
it fit their beliefs a little bit easier,
Yeah.
or whatever.
So there were
That's crazy,
three
and that happened to her too on one of hers.
There were 3 propositions that passed. Voter endorsed ideas. One was Medicare, expanding.
Yeah, that's what it was. Prop 3, expanding Medicare.
Medicaid, expanding Medicaid.
Oh, Medicaid 65, below
then there was,
65, the people that are hurting.
Oh, there's something about letting stores sell beer, right? High Point beer.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And then this other thing, the medical marijuana thing.
Mm-hmm.
And the legislature went in and they eviscerated all 3.
All 3
that
passed
that just shows
on
how
the ballot. The people want this, we're not going to give it to you.
Exactly.
Drives me crazy.
Yeah. Yeah. It's very true. Where are we time-wise, Main Joe?
Well, we're looking good. We got 28 minutes in. I'm not
perfect,
quite ready to
yeah.
let him go yet, though. Come on. I
Well,
got a
he's
couple
coming
more here.
back.
I know,
He's-
but I've got a
he's-
couple more here. Because
right.
now I lost my train of thought. Darn it. Where
we
was
gotta-
I going? Oh, well, it sounds like to me you have to not only read the headlines, you have to do research, it sounds like.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, you have to really understand what happened with this Prop 3 passage and all that, and
Oh, yeah.
what the
I mean-
legislature's doing. Do you ever go up to the House and watch the sessions and all that?
Well, you've seen my legislator, the little guy.
yeah.
Slips and
Yeah, yeah. He was the valet.
That's what it looks like. That's what they look like.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I've been up there.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I do research the stuff because, even though people say, well, they're just a cartoon, I hate being wrong. I hate getting my facts wrong.
Yeah.
Right.
And so when I do a cartoon, I do my due diligence. I read what's out there and I look at both sides and because I don't want to go off half-cocked. I want to do the thing right.
Right.
Yeah.
That doesn't please everybody all the time.
Oh, yeah. How true that is. All right. I'm out of questions at the moment.
All right. We'll take a chill session. We'll come right back with our very welcome guest, Pat Bagley.
Mr. Bagley, thank you again for joining us.
Absolutely.
Well, it's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you so much. And outro music. Me and Joe, thanks again for setting up the studio.
Good to be back, Mojo. Thanks
Yeah.
for opening up the doors,
been
getting
too
us
long.
another great guest, and we'll be right back after a chill session with Pat.
Yeah, call in with any questions.